Hey, it's me, MLB. Here is part 5 of Heavy Training. Enjoy. You gave her a little hug of reassurance, and then your phone chimed. You picked it up and looked at the screen. There was a message from Aizawa. Yes, was all he sent. Something a little more than yes would have been nice, you thought with slight irritation as you put your phone down and looked at Eri. He said, yes, I'll come and have a look soon, you said to her, changing the text message to be a little more suitable an answer for her. Then your phone sounded again and you picked it up. I am outside, it read. Oh, he's outside, you said, a small part of you showing your excitement at him being so close to the house. Can I see him? Eri asked, sitting up and looking over her shoulder in the direction of where your front door was. Eagerness etched into every fibre of her being. Yes, let's both go and see him, you said happily as you got up off the lounge, with her and blanket in arms, and let the apple pieces fall to the floor. Oof, I'll pick those up later. Aizawa over spilled apples any day, you thought as you headed out of the lounge and down the hall to the front door. You unlocked the front door and pulled it open, stepping out into the quiet night and looking up at the stars before looking around the front of your place. Everything was in order, nothing seemed amiss. The place is secure, Aizawa's voice suddenly said to your right, and you jumped violently. You hadn't seen him approaching you because Eri was blocking that side of you. Oh, thanks, you said as you shifted slightly to face him. Isawa, Eri said happily as he reached out and placed a hand on her head while you smiled at him, feeling for a second like this was your own little dream family, and you allowed yourself to sink into the moment. Did you want to come in for a bit? You asked him. I have coffee. You could see those words spoke right to his soul, and his bloodshot eyes rested on you as he removed his hand from Eri's head. Yes, he said in a dead-tired voice. Yay, Eri said joyfully. Joyful, but not wanting to show it, you let Eri show your excitement for you and gestured for him to come in. Has it been a busy night? You asked idly as you walked towards the kitchen, with Eri on your hip and him in tow. No, he said blandly. Well, that's good, I guess. In your line of work, you don't want busy nights, you commented, sitting Eri on the kitchen bench as he walked over and gave her a small lopsided smile. Have you been a good girl for Yin, Eri? He asked as he took a strand of her hair and unkinked it and landed flat on her shoulder. You walked over to the cupboard to get the coffee beans out, and he continued to chat to the little girl. Careful. Don't move or you might fall off the bench, you heard him say, and you turned to see him standing in a way so that he could catch her if she somehow slipped off the bench, but she was being very good and sitting very still. How do you take your coffee? You asked Aizawa as you walked around getting everything set up. He told you, and you nodded, doing what was needed. I like being here, Eri said softly, reaching out her little hand and lightly holding onto a loose part of his shirt. You looked over at her and smiled, and then moved your eyes to him, and he looked back at you from under his heavy fringe. I like you, I like Yin, and I want her as my mummy, Eri said shyly, because she's nice, and she has a mummy blanket like my one, but mine's a little baby one. She has a mummy blanket? Aizawa asked the little girl, who nodded and let go of his shirt so she could thrust her smaller blanket out and show him. This is a baby blanket and Yin has the same one, but it's mummy size, she said proudly, and you noted that her vocabulary and willingness to talk had increased dramatically since Aizawa had arrived. Is that so? Aizawa replied. Eri nodded again. Do you have a daddy blanket? She asked him innocently, tilting her head to the side inquiringly. No. He shook his head. He has a daddy scarf, though, you chimed in, pointing to the scarf around his neck, and Eri brightened when she saw it. Oh, you have a daddy scarf. I have a baby blanket, and Yin has a mummy blanket. We can be a family. You had just set the coffee machine up and had pressed start when she said that, and your face whipped towards her, taking in her excited facial features before looking to see Aizawa's reaction. He was gazing at you, and your face felt suddenly hot, so you looked away quickly. You would like us to be a family? Aizawa asked the little girl, just to make sure that he had heard her correctly. Mm-hmm, Eri replied, without missing a beat. I'd been entertaining the thought, Aizawa commented in a calm, low voice, and your head whipped back to look at him. Just then his pager beeped in his pocket, and he pulled it out to look at it. I have to go, he said, and looked from his pager to Eri. I'll be back soon, he said to her, and then he looked at you. I'll be back for the coffee. And what about clarifying that statement that you just made before your pager interrupted? You screamed internally, unable to say the words out loud as that statement had completely shut you up. You just nodded, to which he replied with a nod and then turned to go. You quickly lifted Eri off the bench and sat her on your hip again, and then followed him to the door to say goodbye, and he stopped for a second to look back at you, and for a split second you actually felt like you were a wife with the baby on your hip saying goodbye to Daddy as he went to work. "I'll knock 4 times," he said before stepping out and throwing his scarf up to the apartment nearby and using it to hoist himself away. You stood there and watched him fly through the darkness and then out of sight, and then carried Eri back inside. "Well, that was nice to see him again, wasn't it?" you said to her, trying to keep the mood going. She nodded and then wriggled a little. "I want to pick up the mess," she said suddenly, indicating to be put down, so you set her down gently and she ran on a little ahead of you, her little feet pattering on the floor as she kiddie ran towards the lounge area, but then stopped in the doorway of the lounge, looking into the darkness. "You okay?" you asked sweetly as you caught up. I just don't like it when it's dark. It makes me scared," she said, giving you big doe eyes as she twisted her little hands into her dress in front of her. "Oh, that's okay, lovely. Let me put the light on for you," you said, reaching in to switch it on. Light flooded the small room, illuminating the apple pieces that were strewn everywhere. "Oh," you said with surprise. "I didn't realize we made such a mess." "It's okay, Ian. I can clean it up," she said quickly. "You make the coffee for Daddy. Aizawa." You smiled at her little Freudian slip and nodded, not acknowledging it on purpose. "Okay, thank you. Call me if you need any help. I'll just be here in the kitchen if you need me, okay?" you said, waiting for her to step away from you before turning to go to the kitchen. What did Isawa say? We will find out if he decides to act on that statement, possibly in the next chapter, possibly in the one after. I keep saying chapter. Part. Possibly in the next part, possibly in the part after. You'll have to stay tuned for next week. I will see you then.